This channel is only about Star Citizen, but we do occasionally dive into what we can learn from other games. And so this is from, there's like a little trio of videos that the devs from Arc Raiders have put out that kind of looks at the development of the game and the kind of where it's come from. And so let us watch this. This, I think, sums up, not my concerns, but the questions that CRG have got for long-term Star Citizen, I think.
To launch a new game today, irrespective of what platform you're on or what type of game it is, it's harder and harder and harder to break into kind of a critical mass that makes any financial sense. I think game developers out there are really scratching their heads thinking, I made a great game. And often you see today that if you've done a really good job, you'll see players jump on, they'll stay there for a while, but guess what? Then they drop out and go and do something else. A big component of that is due to the fact the game didn't have the attributes or instruments needed to retain the players. So it's on us as game developers. It's not the gamers' faults. We need to do a better job of making sure that they have a need and a desire to stick around playing our game. And what can we learn from our previous games? Having gotten finals into the market, we saw a big peak, like a crazy amount of people. Then we saw a drop off. Now, because of hard work, we're seeing people return to the game and we're seeing a growth curve coming back. But I think it's always going to be in what's the long-term motivation for a player to play. It sits in the progression, in the meta layer, making sure that there are meaningful things to do in the game apart from just running around and shooting people. That's probably our biggest challenge and will remain our biggest challenge when we launch the game and after launch.
He's talking about retention, he's about long-term goals, long-term reasons for people to play the game. Can you imagine if Star Citizen was in development for let's say 15, 16, 17 years, 1.0 launches, and then after a couple of, after 6 months, the majority of the player base are just stuff this, I'm done now. Can you imagine the development was that long? And then we all just were nah. Can you imagine if the development actually was the best bit of the game? The game itself wasn't worth playing for a long period of time. They obviously are coming out a bit from a money point of view. They're thinking their motivation for player retention, Arc Raiders, Embark or whatever, is that they want to make more money. And so they want people to play the game, keep playing the game, and there is some stuff that you can buy at the store. Obviously, that isn't as players. We don't care about them making money, but we want to have a game to play for a long. If I don't want to play Star Citizen for 10 plus years once it's actually out, I think I'll be upset. Dune Awakening, yeah. Dune Awakening has had a similar problem potentially. There's games obviously maybe WoW is the best example, World of Warcraft, where people have been playing it for years and years. Eve, I guess, is another great, maybe the closest example. Eve is a game that people have played for years and years. If CIG can't work out how to keep people playing for years and years, I think for an MMO, it would be a failure in some ways. And so they've got to work some of this stuff out. What's the retention stuff? Why do we keep playing? Why are we keeping on playing Star Citizen? We sometimes talk about Star Citizen as is this your main game, your daily driver game or whatever? The game that you want to log into to play with your friends regularly. And some of these things I think are the reason why you do that. At the core of Arc, there is a fun gameplay loop. They then have skill tree to work up, leveling to a 75. They then are aiming to go from 0 gear to loads of gear, to collect blueprints, cosmetics as well. There's trials. They have this thing called, which Star Citizen can't do, where you say, I will optionally wipe my account to get some extra skill points for the skill tree and start from 0 again, but with some bonuses. To translate this back over to SC, although we have wipes now that are not optional, that they do, 1.0, no more resets. They've confirmed this is it. They can't basically wipe everything and get you to earn it all again. These things have to stand on their own as progression tracks that keep you in the game for, hopefully, again, years. The question is, how many of these are kind of already already before we get to 1.0 are already broken by the fact that you can buy some of this stuff in the store? Let's now just go through these different systems and see. Let's ask the questions about each one. So the ship track for 1.0 is hugely compromised by the fact that quite a lot of people have not just got an Aurora when they start out, but they've also got all sorts of ships on their account before 1.0 even starts. And so as a kind of like progression track, if you're a new player to this game when 1.0 launches, I'm jealous of these people who will basically start with an Aurora and they've got the world is their oyster. They've got to jump their way up this to gain, like it makes sense as like the main progression for the game in theory. But because they sold ships, I would say, I don't know what percentage. How many people in the chat have got one ship on their account? Just write the number of ships that you've got in the chat. 24, nice, yes. You're winning so far. One currently, but usually 3. Interesting. 1, yes. So there you go. So you're a prime example, DJ. You backed in 2017, you've only got a Mustang. That, in theory, for you, this progression track works perfectly because 1.0 releases and you can slowly earn money and work your way up this track and you'll have fun. But for most people, it looks like in the chat, that joy is gone. Most people, this track is compromised already. Reputation, currently, I'd say reputation is massively questionable, might be, yeah, I'm going to stick with currently underwhelming now that I've typed it all out. But currently, the reputation system almost doesn't exist. It's broken and there's not really many things that are like hidden behind reputation. There's not the items, there's not blueprints, obviously that's not here, blah, blah, blah. That is a problem. That if 1.0 came out tomorrow, which obviously it's not, you'd have to say that the reputation in the game is currently not a really good progression track to run down. Current reputation is essentially nothing. Yeah, I think that's fair. It's supposed to be much more than just more missions. It's supposed to be a relationship with a faction. We could talk about the fact that the way it was supposed to be in Pyro was quite well fleshed out, but then nothing actually happened. Then we continue down. Money. The problem with money currently, let's say this, the economy, what's the right word? The economy is broken, non-existent. I think we'll go with non-existent. Currently, like a real functioning one. Again, there's no sense of player trading. Again, people will talk about the idea of player-driven economy. That's not really in the plans at the moment. Currently, money, I think, is too easy to earn. And so, and really all you buy, the main thing at the moment that you earn money for is to buy ships. And if you've already bought all the ships, the relationship between those two doesn't really work. Major issues with the economy. Now, they can say, well, we're not at 1.0 yet, so maybe it's okay. We're on the way to balancing this. I think until things like player trading, crafting come in, we won't even have a clue what they're going to do with this. What I'd say is that in Arc Raiders, me being at the start, I'm very poor and it seems to be hard for me, maybe it's because I'm bad, to get money. In Star Citizen, it's quite easy to make money quite quickly and therefore it makes money meaningless, is my opinion on money. I don't ever have to worry about money, I feel like, because the sinks for money are so kind of lacking. The money sinks, the things draining my account seem to not really exist. I don't ever think about money, I suppose. Okay, let's keep going. This is another thing. Item gear progression is another thing that is significantly, I would say, compromised by the store. And also, not just the store, by the fact that even at Luminalia that's about to happen, they're just going to give us a ton of gear. And so, again, let's make this clear. Arc Raiders is not like a one-for-one, it's not like a this game should copy this game, blah, blah, blah. It's just an example. In Arc Raiders, the gear progression is one of the major things. You start with nothing, you build up your gear, you use crafting, blah, 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 and you go from nothing to trying to have really good gear. In Star Citizen, well, you can buy gear on the store for a start, so you don't have to play to get that, which means progression as a progression system, it's compromised. But then CIG do also give us out tons of gear. Now, I've talked in the past about how the idea that one of the reasons that people play the game at the moment is because they give rewards at the end of like a mission chain, so or like an event. So at the resource rush thing, we did it for rewards generally. Now that itself works as a short-term thing because it means that people play the events, but it does mean that their accounts, like if I was to bring up my account, I did an event, so I got some stuff here. Like my account is full of gear already before 1.0 even starts, is my point here. And so the gear progression is somewhat compromised already. This is where they're excelling currently. The mission story progression stuff, you have to say, currently smashing. People are loving the stuff that's coming in the game. They're loving the storylines. They're loving going through those areas. They're loving doing this stuff. And you could argue that if CIG were able to pump out constant content, constant missions in the future. Like we say, other games do. Like WoW, they pump out a new kind of storyline, new content area. People go and do that, and then maybe they'll come back, and then the next time that it starts again. If CIG were able to carry on doing what they're doing, that is a progression track that some people will continue to go. There's new missions, I'll go and do the new missions. It's going to be an interesting one. For some people that works, for some people they're just not interested enough in that. You like the repeatable missions you can do in the ASD? Yeah, a lot of people do. I think the point maybe I should make with this is that maybe looking at this, now having got them all down, the fact that there are so many different things that you could do to progress in Star Citizen actually maybe means it's not such a problem. Whereas I'm coming into this saying it's a big problem. The fact that there are multiple different ways you can progress within Star Citizen, maybe there's enough variety that some people will like this one, some people will like this one, some people won't have bought all the ships, so they'll just do that and that'll be fun. Some people will fully like deep dive into the org stuff and progressing as an org, like building up an org, taking over things and fighting other things. We don't all have to do all of these, I suppose, is the point. And so some people absolutely will love the mission and the stories, like the more kind of theme park content that CIG will put out. Blueprints is another one. So the arc-rated blueprint stuff is quite fun because they're quite rare and you've got quite a lot of them. And so it's like a game. It's almost like Pokemon. You're trying to catch them all, trying to get all the blueprints. I think for a lot of people, getting blueprints in Star Citizen is going to be a big thing. So obviously this doesn't currently non-existent, massive potential. That's how I'd sum up the blueprint stuff. Like the fact that you can upgrade gear, you can upgrade ships, you can upgrade parts. To me, this of all of these, maybe we'll draw a box around it for fun. I think this has the potential to be a massive retention thing for the game. I think some people, this will be a big thing. Can we start to be compromised by the purchased items will give blueprints? Well, that's a good point. Yeah, so that's a fair point. If we've got a load of items here, how CIG decide to separate your items into blueprints and what you've already got does make this complicated. The big thing though will be that blueprints, what won't be compromised, I don't think about blueprints, will be the fact that there's going to be the upgrades. And so whatever you've got maybe already in the store might be the base level, and then the progression stuff for the blueprints will be that you can get a better version of that item. And so even if somebody's got tons of gear in their account, there's still a kind of progression thing to do because you want to upgrade those to get better versions of those through blueprints. You hope different blueprints is locked behind a different gameplay loops. Yeah, I think they'll be behind all of it. I think this is why I'm thinking blueprints potentially are the big progression thing for the game. Like some of them, and again, depending on how CIG do them, are they limited use? Do they just stay go to your account and you've got them permanently? There's all sorts of questions around how they're going to do that. But of everything that's on this list, I think this potentially ties into all of it, and it gives everybody things to crave for and long for in the game. The next one that we don't know really anything about, again, it doesn't exist, is the upgradable skill progression. So the idea behind this one is that, let's use running as an example. You'll be able to maybe run for a certain length of time or at a certain speed. And in theory, the more you do running, you get skill points, or you'll upgrade your running skills and you can run for longer or run faster. That is basically what they've talked about. They've not mentioned it, and there's not been any signs of it developing. We don't know if that will be in a squadron. Potentially it might be, but it currently doesn't exist. What we've talked about slightly in the chat before was the idea that when a character dies, death of a spaceman, to go back to that, potentially your character dies, and so you go from one character to your next character, and the next character maybe loses all the skill upgrades that your first one did. And so potentially this is not a wipe, so to speak, but it is a mini wipe that requires you to build up each new character, that is like, if they do that, that is a loss mechanic for the game. Like that is a genuine sink of time. And so it makes you not want to lose your character. It makes you not want to full die, whatever that means, and however they decide to do that. I personally am not that sure I love this as an idea. I was a bit surprised when they talked about it, considering they said they weren't going to do this, and then they decided, well, we are going to do this. So I'm not sure I completely love it, but there is potential there, but it currently doesn't exist. So yeah. More time sinks. Well, yeah, you could argue that the game itself is so slow to get anything going that, yeah, more time sinks is a problem. In theory, this is like a passive thing that upgrades as you play. So you wouldn't necessarily have to go out of your way to like run up and down some steps like Rocky or whatever to upgrade your running skills. Like you will naturally upgrade. But the only example I think they showed us progression within executing a player. If you're like a beginner at takedowns or something, then it will take longer. If you're intermediate, you'll be quicker. And if you're an expert, it'll be like instant. And maybe there's stuff about how to counter those things. So they've shown us some stuff, but they've never talked about really putting it in the game. And there's no signs of it now. I genuinely wouldn't be shocked if that doesn't make it for 1.0. Now, here is one that's probably the outlier because it's actually all about player skill. There is no, this is a separate thing. In some ways, similar to Arc Raiders, the actual gameplay loop, like, are you good at shooting robots or people? And can you get better at that? Like that is in itself a retention technique. Like I'm bad, I want to get better, and you keep playing so that you get better. That is a thing, and that is what Star Citizen has potential for. The problem at the moment, you say, if we just talk about flight combat, is that many people in that sort of sphere, the Avenger 1 type people, would say that flight model not loved. And then you've got questions around, is the skill gap big enough? This isn't something you can track. You can't track your skill. You might be able to if you like were to join a like combat org, and then in that setting you can fight against other players. You can feel yourself. This is more like, do you feel yourself getting better? So as an FPS player, can you feel yourself getting better in different combat scenarios? Are you taking more people down? Again, completely right. It's very hard to define how skilled you are, maybe, but the potential is that at least at one point, the gap between the worst players and the best players was quite large. I think people now would argue that the skill gap is too small, and so the worst players, well, the best players are better than them, obviously, but the gap between them is too small, and there's not enough progression in terms of skill. But this is all again compromised by the fact that the current flight model is going away again, probably. Like Master Mode is going to change. And so we don't know. I think, again, if you were to ask somebody like Avenger 1, I think he would say he would love it if a new player who'd never flown a ship or a plane in a game before, he would love it if that person had like a long journey to keep getting better, keep improving, try different things, learn how to fly properly. He would love it if that was like a long-term journey, like maybe over a few years, you learn how to be a really good combat pilot. I think he would argue now, having watched a little bit of his stuff, that the journey just isn't long enough. There's not enough to learn. It's too straightforward. I think that's partly what they might argue, those guys. Well, yeah, I suppose that's a good point. There is other skill. So like mining, salvaging, engineering, I suppose, is a player skill as well. We're just learning about now. Like there are things that you can be actually good at in the game rather than just clicking a button and some stat tells you how good you are. Actual player skill isn't just flight model. There are other things, which is a fair point. Now, org progression. Let's keep going because we're nearly towards the end of these. Org progression. I guess one question is, are space stations going to be in for 1.0? I don't know if that will be, but it doesn't really exist. Like org. So we need org tools needed. CIG's plan for orgs is to have Pyro. This is their plan as of a year ago or so. Their plan is to have Pyro having high quality resources, high risk, high reward, and then there's base raiding that happens in Pyro, and then also there is this idea of the SEAL defense tech, the token program. So you fight over things, you earn tokens, the best org earns the tokens, and then they get shields for their stations. This is their current plan. Again, I've said I'm not convinced this is big enough. I don't think the scope of it is big enough. I think orgs want to be fighting over multiple star systems and do things. That's one of the parts. The orgs also will be building the space stations. Again, I don't think that is going to be a 1.0 thing myself. I'd be shocked if this was in for 1.0. Or building a Bengal. There's these big org goals, like things to do. Building a space station, building a giant carrier like a Bengal. They're like big goals for big groups of people. At this stage, it's all theory crafting. Like it's all, nobody knows what this means. CIG I don't think know what this means. There's some vague plans for orgs. And so I would say very unclear how this will work. If we're saying that this is a potential, really, the blueprint thing could really like be a key part of this, I think my big concerns are around, I don't think CIG really know how to do. I mean, it's obviously maybe not the time to do it yet, but I think there's real question marks around this. My fear is that this is something that you do for a few months, and then you'll be like, well, we'll just do the same thing every week. Where's the fun here? I feel like there has to be like expansion. There has to be different locations, different star systems. It has to be bigger than this. Is my worry for the org stuff. I'm assuming all of us here in the chat, all of us, the idea of everybody probably is like, oh, I'll build a base. Like, even if you're not like massively into it, I assume everybody at least will build a small base. Everybody, this is something that in theory, everybody will do. And there again is the idea that building a small base might be quite easy, but then as you want to maybe expand that one base or upgrade that one base, or maybe then build another base in a different location, there's like a big load of kind of resource sinks. You have to collect tons of materials. It's like a long-term, this in theory again is another one, a bit like the blueprints. Potentially this is a really long-term system, something that takes a while and gives people long-term goals. And that might be something that over 6 months you're trying to build up. And so again, doesn't exist, potential is huge. I think base building should be something a whole org would come together to build, not just a single player. I think a big base like this one, I mean, that's terrible, can't see that, but that's a huge the idea. But I think a little one, I would hope as a single player, I would be able to spend weeks, if not months, building up the resources to build myself a little spot. That would be my hope. Now, esports progression, again, this is about player skill. You could, in theory, be on a leaderboard getting better at things. I mean, if anything, you could argue that the Daymar Rally and things like that have been more successful than other parts of the game. You could say that people somehow, even though the game is an absolute mess in some ways, they've managed to make fun of esports. This is a niche one, but that's fine. The esports community is community driven though, not CIG. Yeah, that's fair. And I think that's okay. And I suppose really the org stuff will also be community driven. Like, this is why I'm not that keen on their, like, here's your playground to do go to Pyro and do all the PvP stuff. I think in an ideal world, the org stuff is driven by the orgs. The orgs do what they want to do, and they've got a big enough playground to play in to do that. And I think just saying, just go to Pyro and do that, I don't think is necessarily going to work. I think there's a good chance that people who are in the orgs will say, well, that's not very fun. We're going to go over here and do our own thing. But yeah, I don't think there's a problem with there being retention and progression stuff that is just player driven. But you're right. The esports stuff is purely, the CRG don't really, they maybe help out with some of the events, but they aren't driving this. Yeah, so this one is an interesting, there's the server-wide events here. So the open world server-wide events. So we could have maybe combined this in with the mission story progress stuff, but that I suppose we would say is normal kind of mission story. This is like server-wide big events, lots of people going together, galactic narrative progression as we had. My question mark with this stuff is, will it perform well? And I know they've talked about instancing things like Siege. Will it perform well? But in theory, that is something that people will come in every single time there's a big server. That's kind of what they're doing now. They have events that they run in the game, like Resource Rush. I mean, we had the bad one with the end of Amelia Boyd or whatever. That I didn't think was a very good event. They have those things, and they do bring people back into the game. So they are a kind of retention technique. They do work well. Like we said, sometimes they put rewards behind them that people want to get, so they run through them. Sometimes, like with the Resource Rush one, people will bang their heads against the wall over and over and over and over again just to get some skins. It does work, whether it's good, and again, whether there's performance problems or bugs or whatever. If it's big server-wide like combat things like Xenothreat, they traditionally have been badly optimized and haven't worked very well from a performance point of view. My premise for this, and I guess this will be a video, Star Citizen 1.0, there's all sorts of progression questions, and we've looked a little bit about how Arc Raiders has its own progression stuff. And again, let me say it one more time, they're not the same game, they're not the same types of game, but there's stuff you can learn from other games. And the question with Star Citizen progression is, what are they and do they work? I think, as you can see, there's question marks around almost all of these, and so the work that CIG have to do to get them in a good place for 1.0 is ginormous. This is why anybody who's saying 1.0 is coming soon, I'm like, what do you mean? Because there's tons of work to do, I think, before even like a basic version of 1.0 comes out, or they put out a version of 1.0 that's not very good. Like, I think if, say they hadn't fixed Reputation by 1.0, if it was basically the same as it is now, you'd be like, what are they, you can't put out 1.0 with the current version of Reputation. Like, it's so lacking. And again, the economy, had they not fixed the economy, had they not balanced, had they not thought about player trading, had they not considered a player-driven economy, you couldn't call it 1.0 in some ways. Like, 1.0 is their chance to put out a good version of Star Citizen. And if it doesn't have some of this stuff fixed by then, it will be bad for the game's reputation again long term, because the gaming websites will say Star Citizen is finally released 1.0. People might then go and check it out. But if it's rubbish, if some of this stuff isn't fixed, it'll be Sam Citizen again. Yeah, there you go. CIG's 1.0 progression problem. Can they solve it? We will have to see.